Have you ever walked down a familiar street or not familiar, that while walking you suddenly seem to step into the same street only decades if not centuries earlier in the past? Your feet suddenly having dirt underneath them while a moment prior was modern day concrete. Buildings either disappear or change into the old buildings that shouldn't be there. Clothes of the people in the streets and shops looking from a time long since gone. These are the various recollections of the people who have claimed to experience walking through a time portal or time vortex, and as fast as it happens, it just changes back. Online forums have allowed users to share their experiences of some of these time slips, all sharing very similar experiences.
I'm not sure how to describe it. I was aware of the building I was passing, but then I must have zoned out or something, and then when I was aware again, I realized I was walking past the same building again, or still, and I looked at my watch and 10 minutes had gone by, but I was still in the same area.
In Victoria, British Columbia, the street of Shelburne has had an urban legend circling for years. If you were to walk or drive down a very specific 2-block stretch of Shelburne between 2 and 3 a.m. on an October night, you may suddenly be transported back in time, the sidewalk changing beneath your feet and the houses and buildings changing before your eyes as time gone by. This is one of the legends that seem to have a recurring time slip in a set place and time. Some of the other stories have only one encounter or report. Those that have tried to recreate this walk have come up short in traveling back in time or have anything out of the ordinary happen to them.
Late at night in early September 2017, I was walking several friends from out of town back to their home. We crossed Shelburne at Bay St heading east, and all of a sudden we were on Denman Street, about to cross Fernwood Road facing west, the opposite direction we were originally headed. It was a very strange and unexplainable profound experience, and left me with a weird feeling in my gut. We jokingly referred to it later as walking through a wormhole.
In 1996 in Liverpool, an off-duty policeman named Frank was going to meet his wife, Carol, in a bookshop called Dillon's, when suddenly a small box van that looked like something out of the 1950s sped across his path, honking its horn as it narrowly missed him. More disorienting still, Frank saw that Dillon's bookstore now had crypts over its entrance, and that there were stands of shoes and handbags in the window instead of new fiction. The only other person not wearing a mid-century dress was a girl in lime green sleeveless top. As Frank followed her into the old woman's wear boutique, the interior of the building completely changed in a flash. It was once again a bookshop. Like other time slip stories, the experience quickly vanished, and time was regained. After the report of this story, the store Cripps was found out to be an actual business that existed in the 1950s. In these experiences, the person who goes through these vortexes has some awareness of their current time and surroundings when they slip into a different time. Sometimes during the slip they can lose a sense of time during the slip or retain a sense of how much time has passed, but when they come out of it, they all conclude that more time has passed than would seem possible. There is usually an unsettling or dark or cold depressing feeling. Some people describe an eerie fog rolling in around them, engulfing them as they emerge into a different time. One of these cases involves physical evidence of traveling to another time, the case of Mr. Squirrel. In 1973, he entered an envelope shop and was helped by a woman in an old Edwardian dress. He purchased a bunch of envelopes and left the shop. The next day he returned only to find that the entire shop had changed completely. When he asked the staff about the strange woman who sold him envelopes the day before, the staff was unable to recall anyone of the sort who worked there. He held the envelopes in his hand and soon discovered that the company that made them had went out of business over a decade prior. In another story, heading to Spain in 1979, 2 married couples were on vacation, and while they were driving through France, they stopped at a local hotel. They spent the night, had dinner, however, during which both couples remarked how everything there seemed outdated. Even their bedroom had no window panes, only shutters. The bed had no pillows and no sheets, only calico fabric. The bill they paid seemed quite low for the time, and when they asked for directions to the nearest highway, the hotel staff seemed to not know what they were talking about, or even what cars were. While there, they had taken pictures of their stay, and when they got the roll developed, all the pictures in the hotel were missing from the roll. And on their way back, they tried to stop at the same hotel. But when they arrived at the location, there was no hotel to be found. One of the earliest stories of a time slip occurred during the early 1900s in Paris. Annie Moberly and Francis Jourdain felt a distinct change in the atmosphere one day, and they began to see gentlemen in tri-cornered hats strolling the ground. Women in old-fashioned clothing was spotted by them, and it became quite clear that they were actually strolling through the 1700s instead of the early 1900s. When Jourdain revisited Paris a year later, he saw that the entire scenery was completely different. Some more encounters from people who have heard reports or witnessed some of these time slips.
I haven't had any experiences like that, but there's a documented story of a boy in the 1800s that came upon a man in the forest that invited him over to dinner with his family. He went to dinner and met everyone, a friend of his family included, and had an enjoyable meal and evening. Ended up falling asleep there and got up in the morning and had the man walk him halfway home. Right after the man left him, the family friend he saw at the house came upon him. He was part of a search party and they had been searching for him for days, I believe. He turned around and it was just forest. No house, no man, no family, and no family friend. He had just spent the evening in a house with a family that didn't even exist. Pretty wild stuff. I think I'd go insane if something like that ever happened to me.
Something like that happened to me last night actually. Nothing that big to compare. But I know as I went to bed I slept on the couch upstairs. And it was like 12 o'clock at night. At the time I managed to remember almost 8 long dreams, but I know for a fact it wasn't from a dream. By the time I realized what the fuck it was, I shot up and looked for a weapon. After I shot up off the couch there was one more bang. It was still pitch black outside like it was when I went to bed. It was the loudest, but it was the last. Though my door had come off. I grabbed my tomahawk and ran downstairs. For some reason I didn't call the police. As I made it downstairs there was nothing but snoring I thought I heard from my mom in her bedroom. She snores loudly. Then I went into the kitchen, where the back door was, and there was my mom standing by the sink doing nothing. Although I didn't realize it then, she was strange. Just standing by the sink doing her best not to face me and repeatedly telling me that it's 12 o'clock and I need to go back to bed. I went upstairs, figured it must have been a dream. As I reached the top of the steps I realized my tomahawk I grabbed was gone. I thought I must have set it down, so I went back to bed. After I woke up, told my mom my strange dream. She said it was crazy because I fell asleep on the living room floor and didn't go upstairs till early morning. I still am trying to piece together whatever TF happened. And I know for a fact it wasn't a dream.
I had a similar experience a few years back. A friend and I were driving semi-aimlessly in the backcountry out in the western USA. This happened in eastern Oregon. We had been camping at various places and had no real agenda. We were driving back roads to sightsee and taking the long way to eventually get to where we were going, which was quite far away. But we had the time constraint to get there. This one day started normal as we drove the back roads, but then partway through the day things got a little strange, like the weather completely changed and the sky just felt and looked different. I justified it as the weather just shifting and coming in fast like it can sometimes in the mountains, but it wasn't exactly that. We kept driving and at one point the road curved around the hills as it did, and we ended up driving through Main Street of a small town like we had before. A standard small town with some ranch/farming properties at the edge, little houses, and what looked like business fronts that didn't see much activity, and a diner down at the far end. At first I saw the diner and immediately said, "Hey, let's stop for lunch," as I have had good experiences with great diners in small town having some local delicacy like great pies or milkshakes. But as we kept driving into the town, a strange feeling crept over me. That strangeness of the day increased in intensity and I was starting to feel worse. We were driving quite slow and it almost felt like the air was thicker, if that made any sense. As we approached the diner, we saw the first person in town, on the opposite side of the street in the front yard of a house. The person had walked to their short fence and were just staring at us as we drove up and past them. No real expression on their face or reaction to us. Maybe just a small town that rarely sees travelers? As we approached the diner, we saw all of the people inside there looking out at us. People sitting on booths, people sitting at and behind the counter. Every single one was just staring out the windows at us. The place had a real 50s or 60s kind of diner vibe to it, and I don't recall any particular sign or name. Nor do I recall anything special about the cars and trucks in the parking lot or around town. Although not one car drove on the road in either direction when we were there. I said to my friend something about not feeling hungry anymore, and why don't we keep going, and she said, yes, this place isn't right. We both felt strong vibes of get out of here. So instead of turning into the diner's parking area, I just downshifted the car and we sped off out of town. The act of leaving immediately made me feel a little better. I couldn't help but to keep looking back at the diner, and everyone just kept looking at us. There was a fork in the road at the end of town, and I just took a right turn and kept going, seemingly compelled to flee the place. We didn't even check the map. It wasn't until a couple hours later did we talk about it again, or even look at a map, when things no longer felt that same strange way. I can't recall the name of the town, even though we were looking at maps all during that trip. I can recall nearly the entire rest of the trip, where we drove, where we camped, and where we got hotels, etc. But looking on maps for that place, I can't find it. But that may be more of a function of my memory than anything else.
Now, the concept of time slips and time portals is a big one online with the Reddit community and YouTube. Stories and accounts can provide a long, deep dive into this paranormal type of event. There's a lot of anecdotal evidence, but really, that's all we have, and as with other topics like this, with the popularity, it's difficult to determine which is a genuine encounter and one who's made it up for internet clout. But let's take a look at the phenomena as if it were true. What would be causing this? Could there really be portals and time slips that allow people to travel to the past? If it were genuine traveling back in time, then these individuals wouldn't be walking in the same street at all, not in the same distant past. They'd be walking in space for about 30 seconds or so before they perished. They would, however, be in the future or present path of the Earth. Unless these portals can somehow attach themselves to the Earth and each event is attached to the Earth as it moves through space, then the genuine time travel shouldn't be a thing. Now, could people be hallucinating? Very possible in some instances. The more complex ones, where there are multiple people witnessing the event, is a little harder to explain away with that. Now, what it does sound like is remnants of an old program, a glitch, where some of the old code becomes visible to the users where they shouldn't. Like some of these people experienced an older variation of the simulation we are all in, and thus the explanation of why the time and place on Earth can travel with the Earth through space. In many ways, the idea of time travel, in my opinion, if it were possible, would give the simulation theory the leading theory on what reality is. But now it's time for you to tell me what you think. What causes these time slips? Let me know in the comments below. Please like, share, and subscribe. It really helps out a small channel like this one. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll talk to you next time.